Gentlemen, let's start with Moses introducing yourself.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Moses Kemibaro. I'm the founder and CEO of Dotsavvy, a digital marketing agency. I also happen to be a blogger and somebody who writes about technology at moseskemibaro.com, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Fantastic. Hi, guys. Name is Mbugua Njihia. I'm a venture scout in the technology space, meaning I look at different verticals of opportunity. I also write on Matters Technology, have a column in the Business Daily running. I think this is the 11th year. And I've got a bit of a time in the trenches from when web or anything connected to domains was novel. And yes, it is exciting to be here today.
Thank you very much. My name is Gitau Muraguri. My background was actually in finance and banking. I spent over 10 years there, and my main job back then was financing real estate. So I've pivoted now into selling digital real estate, which for me, I think, and I really hope that a lot of you are seeing the opportunity, offers a much bigger opportunity, especially now for investors. I like what our CEO has, he actually preempted I was going to use the example of DN.com. So I actually came with my hat. Mike gave me a hat. See this DN.com. So today I'll wear this hat, and it's pretty much just to drive the discourse around the potential. He probably paid $10 for this name, and now he's turning down offers of $3 million and probably more by now. So I was lucky to meet with him, and I think over the few months that I've been preaching about .ke, I keep more and more seeing the potential of domain names. I think the market here in Kenya right now is everybody's thinking about the next dot which they can buy and wait for maybe 5-10 years and wait for it to appreciate. But domains, if you ask me now, you're spending how much? How much are domains going for now? A typical .ke domain will cost you maybe 1,000, maybe 3,000, maybe 5,000. But look at what people are now paying for domains, given the special interest or the demand that's actually being realized out of from the market. So let me throw it back to you. What are your thoughts on how we can start to monetize this sector and industry?
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe going back to the earlier conversation about utility, I think inherently a domain name on its own doesn't really do very much, right? You need to attach it to an email address, you need to connect it to a website, a service, a brand, so that it actually does something for you. But I'm of two minds as we talk about this, and I'm going to share two examples. Do you guys know why Kenya-airways.com exists? What was discussed? Was it that they could not get .com, Kenya-airways.com? So many years ago, when I still had hair, in the early days of the internet, working at a company called 3 Mice, which was owned by Online, I was one of the account managers handling Kenya Airways, and they identified a party who owned Kenya-airways.com. And these guys approached through the lawyer, and I think the individual who owned it at the time wanted something like $10,000. He refused to pay for it. So they refused to pay him. Yeah. And that is why till today we have Kenya-airways.com. They actually had an opportunity to own Kenya-airways.com, which, as you know, I don't know that you guys know this in this room, many people do not actually go to Google to find a website. There's something called direct navigation. People actually type in your brand and presume it is KeNIC.com. They presume it's KeNIC.com or .ke. And there's a lot of brand value and equity lost in brands that do not own those domain names, right? I'm going to say something maybe a little bit controversial here. KeNIC recently rebranded. Have you guys seen that? Is it KeNIC water we're drinking? Do you know you can go right now online and register all those domains? KeNIC.com, KeNIC.ke, and KeNIC.co.ke. Do you know you can actually do that? And this is the thing that worries me, that we don't take our domain name seriously, because a lot of consumers will not go to Google, they'll presume your brand name. You've built 30 years worth of brand equity in it, and you register. I want to share another story with you. When I used to work for Africa Online, we had a client in Diani called Aussie Mike. This guy used to make furniture in Diani. Aussie Mike, before anybody knew anything, used to own the domain name championsleague.com. Yes, even ICANN and all came after him. And unfortunately, in those days, what is Champions League? Yes, there's football, but for many people, Champions League could have been anything. You could justify it as meaning anything. I think eventually he cashed out for over $3 million. Now, let me share with you a personal story. Once upon a time with a good friend of mine, I'll not name him here, Mbugua, somebody we both know, had a company called May Communications. So out of the blue, he calls me and says, Moses, please register this domain name for me. It was $9. I registered it and we just sat on it. He didn't do anything with it. In fact, he didn't even pay me for it. But anyway, let me go on. So out of the blue, I get contacted by somebody through a company called Sedo, sedo.com. If you know anything about domain names, Sedo are a domain name proxy service. They help people buy domain names discreetly. They trade them, domain name trading as it were. And out of the blues, I didn't even know about this industry, the things that Andrew has talked about, and say, look, we want to buy this domain name. So speculatively, I told them, okay, I'm going to sell it for you for $5,000. The next thing I knew, I said, this guy sent me an email an hour later. The client has agreed. We're going to put it in escrow, change the DNS records for the domain name. You'll have the money in 2 days. I was so broke at the time, by the way. 2 days later, $5,000 checks into my bank account. Now, there's so many opportunities around domain names, but I too at some point used to register domain names for speculation. Just holding them, I still have a few here and there, but there's great opportunity in both the aftermarket where a domain name has been pre-owned and you can resell it, or you can build utility around the same. But I think the biggest risk that I see locally in Kenya is the fact that people don't own their brand equity. The last thing I want to mention is, guys, the dollar rate. Just now, I've been talking to my finance manager and saying, by the way, all our rates now have to go up by 40% because we're paying in dollars for services denoted in dollars. The reality is right now, .ke domain names are significantly more affordable than paying for the .coms and so forth. Number two, availability. Under .ke, you can get names you could never get under .com. Number four, Kenyans now today believe or respect or appreciate a .ke domain name more than a .com because it has that Kenyanness about it. Maybe that wasn't the case 10 years ago, but I personally love the fact that I can get any name I want under the KE. So that again is a missed opportunity in the sense that those brands that are not investing, consumers are shifting their perspective around the .ke, especially post-pandemic. And the last thing, probably the most important thing, is the direct navigation. People will presume your domain name exists under .co.ke or .ke. They will not even go to Google. And if nothing shows up, chances are, because the human is lazy, they won't even bother going to Google search again. They'll just assume there's no website. All right? So thank you.
Fantastic. Now that you're talking about monetization, the guy with KenyaAirways.com, let's use that as a classic use case. If you're in that sector, you'll know that the majority of the tickets are actually not sold directly. They're sold by agents. So if I was them, one of the things I'd do, because we now live in the day and age of APIs, is I'd literally put up a proper business as an agent riding off that. And chances are that, and the numbers I'm using are for a young man who built a set of applications for the smaller airlines out of Wilson and was selling 4 million shillings worth of tickets every month for himself, single man operation. Now imagine at scale doing that for a property like the TLD that you're talking about. Monetization right out of the box. Not speculative. You don't need to pack it. You don't need, because even with parking, the Sedo people and even GoDaddy, anyone who lists and puts ads there, they do make something, but I highly doubt it would be the equivalent of a commission based off a ticket sale, whether international or local. Let's speak about where we are from. Kitambo, Moses and I were in the era where you could charge 7 million, 10 million shillings for a website. Right, I remember doing, the likes of Safaricom, Case, all these big ones. And then tools democratize the internet. Now, everyone and their son can do Wix, right? There's WordPress, there are all these templates that you can buy out there. So even out of the blocks, when you're talking about utility earlier, and how do we drive value for this SME, we forget the power of bundling. Bundling means that I can come in and at the click of a button, I mean, all of us who've worked on domain properties, you know how easy it is, say, to use something like cPanel. If I can click and from my domain name, I get every other thing set up out of the box, I'm willing to pay, for that. And maybe having simple tools. Now we have the likes of ChatGPT that could say, tell me what industry you're in. I'm in Mombasa. I run a seafood restaurant called Mawimbi. Help me generate content. Now that is value people are willing to, to pay for. And right out of the blocks, you can have a service that ikifika November, and you're sending a reminder for this guy to pay some 5,000 shillings. The domain was 1K, but the value-added services is 4Gs. They're more than willing to pay for that. One more, looking at historically, just again at utility. In those early days, I remember one of the properties we worked on when we were at a company called 3 Mice was something called Life in Red. People nowadays think social networks started with Facebook. The days of, if you're willing to show your age, the days of Friendster, the days of MySpace, we had something locally called Life in Red. And that property had 100,000 registered users. We were streaming radio on that property while we're still using Windows Media Player plugins. But you could imagine it is even difficult to achieve those numbers now. But we created properties that people are willing to go to, and we used to call them digital fireplaces. So if you're looking for a cheat sheet of what to do, the beautiful thing about the internet now is that there are so many communities that you can set up. How many of us are in all these WhatsApp groups that my phone is on mute on WhatsApp because it would be a now that just gives you a semblance of the opportunity out there in these niche communities, whether it is dog owners, whether it's people who like chihuahuas, and you're starting a Chihuahua association and chihuahua.ke, and you've got 1,000 people who are paying some form of subscription to know this weekend we're going to Karura to walk our chihuahuas. There's going to be a minder. It's 500 bob for the chihuahuas, and the guy who's going to stoop and scoop. All these things are out there. We just really need to think, out of the box and look at what are people actually looking to do, not only online, but also offline.
Thank you very much. I think, and I really hope that you're seeing the sort of opportunities that exist with domains. There's a lady who had asked about success stories, and maybe just remembering a discussion that we had with one of the registrars where their client requested for a domain to be registered, and he paid 6,000 bob, and they added a lot of content to it, and they've used it now for their business. But because it has a very strategic name, and again now pointing back to there's somebody was asking about search engine optimization. The name was a very easy one, so they've recently just sold it for $25,000. So if you all have your calculators on your phone, just calculate what sort of return that is, from 6,000 shillings to $25,000. The asking price was initially $50,000. So you can imagine the sort of return that people are having out of domains. I don't know if you may have any other local examples of what this could look like.
I think for me, one of the things, because at one point I was actually on the board at KeNIC, that I've always hoped that we'll do locally, just like we have domain name marketplaces like Sedo. There was another one, I think, some years ago, I forget their name, but like Sedo, you could, if we were to create, I think, to allow users to surface domain names that are possibly pre-registered or available in a way that makes it a marketplace. It's almost like going to eBay, almost like going to a place where you can buy and sell. The idea would be those who are just holding domain names can put their domain names there to be listed, and possibly with a valuation. You also see this on GoDaddy.com. Equally so, if I'm coming and looking for a premium domain name that I think aligns to my industry, maybe salt.ke or sugar.ke, and potentially it represents a whole industry opportunity, how would I be able to easily surface those domain names and purchase them online? And I think that's a huge opportunity, because if you look at domain trading as an industry or profession, it's something that may not be as popular as it used to be, just because of the advent of social media, and people are now using, Google Places and Facebook pages and Instagram pages as almost a proxy for a website. I think there's a massive opportunity where domain names could be surfaced and found. And I know that, of course, there's the auction that happens every so often, as it is right now. And I know that a lot of revenue and sales have been done in this manner. But I think within the local context, amongst ourselves, if we have dormant, underutilized domain names, how can we create a platform where we can buy and sell and trade in them? And more importantly, in that process, therefore, the value, just like land, of those domain names will increase substantially, especially when we have this discovery process. You go there, you see something you like, and just like you'd buy an art piece or you'd buy a car in a showroom, you say, I think I want that one. Why not? It would be perfect for this business idea or something I'm doing. So if we can maybe explore the possibility of domain name trading at a local level, paying with M-Pesa, very fluid, very frictionless way of doing so, I think there's a massive opportunity going forward from a local perspective.
I fully agree, actually, because that sounds like a secondary market for
Correct.
domains.
Correct. A domain name secondary market, locally based on a local platform.
I think my challenge is to all of us, both in this room and also online. I think we just need to get creative, get out there. I don't know, maybe there's probably matatu.co.ke or matatu.ke or I mean, you almost need to just think out of the box and get, find out whether a name has already been registered, because likely it is available and you could actually do something with it.
Can I add something? Maybe just
Absolutely.
another idea to borrow from the crypto space, the cryptocurrency space. Maybe some of you are aware of the phenomena or the development of NFTs, non-fungible tokens. And the funny thing about that space is that, NFTs are based on the blockchain. In many instances, people have been creating art or creative assets, which people have been speculating on and being sold for, cryptocurrencies worth millions of dollars. And I think currently people like Bored Apes and a few others are the most popular, but most of them have lost like 90% of their value. But what is interesting in that space that's happening now is, as much as the general commercial make money quick area has become sort of bad for it, I think it goes back to the days of the internet itself, when, in the early days when everything went .bomb, people thought the internet itself was not viable. The very internet itself, people suspected wasn't viable. But subsequently, as you can see, we are still here and we're still using it. And I think if we look at it that way, then the NFT thing is interesting, because where the real value is now is in applications like, for instance, using your NFT to provide validation of an authentic product, right? So people are using it, for instance, to validate that that is a Louis Vuitton bag because it has an NFT as a proof of authenticity. And maybe in some ways, if we look at that, maybe there's a thesis there around domain names becoming a way of validating or confirming a product or service is indeed authentic, right? Especially now in the Kenyan context for .ke. So there's a lot of opportunities around thinking differently about what a domain name is, and whether maybe a domain name can denote things like authenticity, which can give trust to the buyer of a product or service on your platform.
Absolutely. Do you want to go?
Yes. The earlier panel, we were talking about how do you convince someone that they should then get, MbuguaNjihia.com. Because in the advent of social media, you could argue that, hey, utanipata Insta, niko FB, etc. But it's because one of the easiest ways to do that is to tell people that, let me use the example of LinkedIn. Before Microsoft bought LinkedIn, you could essentially grow your network on LinkedIn, and every so often you could go and say, I want to export my network. And when you export your network, you'd get your entire network. You get the names, phone numbers, email addresses. And I use that to great effect in those early years to kind of like do lead gen. Now, this is what happened. After Microsoft bought it, what do you think happened? They killed that feature. So if CEO Lewela here had 100,000 followers on LinkedIn, and he assumed that any day he could just go and export his network and then have access to it, because you cultivate those audiences. By tomorrow, there's nothing. But if you actively engage and then move people to a platform that you own, whatever they wake up and do tomorrow, we're seeing what's happening on X. Suddenly, you can't DM if you're not on Premier. API access has gone to, I think the cheapest is $42,000. So it's a no-brainer that when you cultivate these networks and you use them to grow your business, you have to actively think of how you're going to funnel that back to properties that you own. And the only way to do that is by, say, having your own domain and having services on the back of that that allow you to then lock in that value and cultivate it over time. Otherwise, you'll continue doing all this work, and tomorrow, Pale Mukuru, kwa Zuckerberg, they have a change in policy, and suddenly you can't do anything on IG, you can't do anything on WhatsApp, all that goes away. So you must very actively think of how you can draw people to your own property, develop a sort of brand equity around your domain names, and that way, that cost of 1,000, 5,000, disappears, because the real truth and the real value of what you have is the business or the leads or any other tangible asset, intangible asset that you've been able to build in a digital world, accessible to you.
Sorry, I just remembered something I think it's important to mention. I don't see it as much these days, but I think it's still important. We've had instances where, and even till now, where with some clients, we actually preemptively register their brand name across multiple domain names. Yeah? So what we do is we do something called domain name aliasing. And what that means is, if let's say Andrew goes to kemibaro.ke, kemibaro.co.ke, kemibaro.com, kemibaro.ca, you'll always land on the same website or page. That's another opportunity for domain registrars, meaning that as opposed to selling one domain for your 2,000 shillings, you could sell variants of the .ke extension, but also variants of other ones, meaning that suddenly a 1,000, 2,000 shilling sale could easily become 50,000 plus. All right. And by doing so, there's the added service behind that, which is the aliasing, which is a value add that you charge for. All right. So think about brands like, popular Kenyan brands, even Safaricom. Why would they not have 50, 60, 70 domain names to preemptively lock in any possibility of anyone squatting on their domains? And back in the day, I remember that even law firms would contact you, global law firms, and say, look, we have a client who has an operation in Kenya. We are trying to protect their brand globally. So they would reach out, they would tell you, these are the ones we need to confirm availability, and then you register. So I think that's another monetization opportunity. So you create the pages, the websites, and then you proactively inform your client. By the way, it would be a good practice to secure these other 5, 6, 10, 11 domains to protect your brand equity. And for a fee, we will make sure that we alias and point all of them to your preferred website destination. That way you don't lose traffic, and you don't have the risk of losing your brand equity in the process. Because remember, if the domain looks authentic, people can be sent there. And I remember an instance, this actually happened to us many years ago, where we built a website, I think it was for Equity Bank. And some guys with all due respect to my friends in West Africa from Nigeria, had registered a clone called Equity Bank something something under .com. They then started funneling traffic to that site, which was identical in every way to the Kenyan one that we'd built. And in the process of doing so, they had sent an email saying that we think there's something wrong with your account. Please log in and change your password. So the place that you used to know where to log in, you went there, the site was identical, and you put in your details, and lo and behold, what you actually did is give them your password. They then had a bot that would go into the back end and siphon the money from your bank account. This is a long time ago, over 10 years ago. But the point I'm trying to say is that if you don't secure your brand equity across domains, there's a risk, but also there's an opportunity, because you as a domain registrar can sell more domain names and value-added services, even from a security perspective. Yeah.
I really hope our registrars in the room and also watching online are taking furious notes, because that's a nugget right there. Thank you very much for that, Moses. I'll throw two numbers. One, there's about roughly 80% of the domains registered have a website. The rest in Kenya, I'm talking about .ke, do not have an active website. How can we encourage or drive them towards actually building a website and using it for their business?
Is that the North Star? Having a website? Ladies in the room, when you go to buy your shoe from Instagram, do you ask for a website? Hardly not. Maybe if we go back to first principles and say the internet is supposed to empower two things, communications and commerce.
Yeah.
We assume, for the majority of us in the room, that everyone should have an email address, for example. Because the email address powers many things. That's how you sign on to your social media. That's how you sign on to your mobile banking account. Maybe the thing is not, we're back on the track of utility. Maybe the thing is not, the website is not the end all. It's how do you drive more utility. So let me throw something out there. What is the other number that is probably, what are the other two numbers that are probably super unique to an individual in Kenya? One is your mobile number. The other one is your ID. My ID number 2424 XXX XXX. .ke. Maybe, because then I can use that to auto-generate an email from there that I can use on eCitizen. Do I have to be online to do so? I can be mobile, but not necessarily online. Can I dial a USSD code to dunge IPRS, ninunue domain name linked to my ID that is verified by IPRS, a government registered document, or a phone number? And the reason why you have a phone number is because nowadays with a phone number, you have to be person present at, say, the telco. Then, can I enable my cousins out in Geshagi to very easily onboard to any other service? Now, they want to sell something on Facebook. They have an email that they can use, your driving utility. Here's a second line to that. As they have that email address, what do we have most of the time? Most of us have banking applications, etc. Do I even need to have an email that is Google? Do I need to have it as Yahoo? Can I have it, whatever this extension is, can I have it automatically there in a way that the next time you from your Gmail are sending me email, can you send it to my ID at my domain name and I receive it on my mobile phone? You know, Kitambo used to have very simple services like email to SMS. And because you're talking about bridging a digital divide, can you imagine a world where that I can send you something rich via email to your email that you're saying has been generated by my ID, and it gets to me even when I'm offline? I'm just throwing some wild ideas out there to show that maybe the website is not the end all. When I drive this utility, is it something that somebody somewhere is willing to pay? Kama ile wangapi mko na call ringback tone nikikupigia simu inaimba Rose Mohando? It is a massive business. People pay 1 shilling, between 1 shilling 75 cents, even up to 3 shillings per day. What if you give a service that you could bill in that way, and across 1 year at 3 bob, how much is that? We're around the price of a domain. We're around 1,000 bob. So can you also get innovative around some of the solutions we are looking at doing? Because the majority of this market is not in Nairobi. It's mashinani, where my social network, the reason why I'm not on Instagram, why I'm not on Facebook, I'm not on TikTok, is if I want to see my girlfriend, I go to the other side of the hill. I go to see my mother there. Naenda kanisa ma mosque pale. That is my social network. Naenda pale kwa town, nikule miraa, chini ya mti na mabeste. Give me utility that connects me to the global economy and help me find a way to pay for it easily. So hopefully I've disrupted your website. Absolutely. As an end game thought.
Moses,
you know, just to add on to Mbugua, I just remembered something interesting. You know, many years ago, I registered Kemibaro.com. So it's been there maybe 20 plus years. I put all my family there. We have our emails and so forth. And there's one day I was like, no, what, is this thing of any value? And I just asked them, you know, do we need this? And I remember people like, no, I need that email. And that sense of ownership and identity, I think, is a very powerful opportunity, because let me tell you, on my phone, there are people where I have to put an extension on their name because there's so many Andrew Kariukis. There's so many James Odongos, you know, and I'm asking myself a question here right now as you are talking. What if one of the business opportunities is you look for those extensions or domains based on popular Kenyan surnames or names? Minor.ke. Now, what if you went to the minor.ke community across the country and said, guys, I'm going to throw you this service for 1,000 bob a year, you'll get an email or something, but I want a subscription and I'm going to get all the miners.kes onto that particular domain as their primary email. How cool would it be if your name is Anthony and then it's anthony@miner.ke? Yeah, that's a domain name you'll want for life, isn't it?
Yep.
So as we start thinking about unconventional approaches, sometimes it's right in front of us. An opportunity built around the fact that, hang on a second, there's 100,000 guys called Miner. And now you're giving them the opportunity to have a domain name that has their first name and then their surname there. So let's think about these things a little bit differently, a little bit unconventionally, because that is the opportunity, I think.
Amazing. Questions? Chief Evangelist.
Before I do my vote of thanks. It's rare, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sweating and shifting in my seat because of a panel and not the food I ate over lunch. Those who are old enough, these are some of my seniors. How many have heard of the PayPal mafia? PayPal mafia. Good. I urge you to, tonight before you sleep, just Google PayPal mafia and just listen to whatever is up there. So recently, I think there was an article and I was being referred personally as a cellulant mafia, and I'm not. But I can assure you, these two gentlemen who are exciting me, I don't know, I hope the young people are being excited because these are the old folks. This is the 3 Mice Mafia, who then became, and they're still a mob. This is a mob. And I say it with a lot of humility because if you want to hang on to somebody's coat, I think all the young people in the room, talk to these people. So thank you, gentlemen, for sort of exciting my creative juices in the conversation. I have one question for you, Kemibaro. The DNS system, as we have been discussing the last 2 days, certainly exists in a certain very codified and curated space in the global architecture. Are you aware of a way of linking the domain name space as we look at it now, or a top level domain like .ke with the blockchain space?
So interesting you bring that up, and I think Mbugua maybe has more context on this one. But I do know and I'm aware of the fact that you can register identities under .eth. So under crypto, you can actually have what looks like a domain name and it's unique to you, but it's also linked back to an NFT. So as a proof of identity, of almost proof of personhood, what I think WorldCon is trying to do, this .eth extension is now one of the ways that you can somehow connect an element of DNS back to this crypto situation, and of course back to the blockchain by extension. So it's something that I believe that is happening. I think it's a fantastic opportunity for KeNIC and also our namespace, and I think it's something that we can actually explore. Maybe Mbugua, you can also add on the same.
You've covered it pretty much, and it goes towards, especially if I'll keep talking about connecting to the global economy. Phone numbers, Kenya is 9 digits. You start going to countries that have 1 billion people, and then suddenly the phone numbers get much, much longer. So it's a lot more difficult for me to think of sending you money if I'm going to go on a mobile money platform and use a phone number. So if I need to transfer value to you, what is easier to remember? MbuguaNjihia.com or Mbugua.ke is much easier. And I want to send that, and then it can of course check on chain, maybe bring me something that helps me verify that it is you. I can see a lot more details about you, maybe even the last thing that you tweeted out, etc., to verify that I want to make that transaction. So that's a very tangible use case of, hey, we all want to, you have a contract with someone out there, how do they pay you? Can they go on chain, and what can they use to verify your identity? I think that's the next level, and that can actually really drive adoption of local domain names and people just wanting to have that identity linked.
I think ultimately what we're saying is that things like your land purchases, authenticity on things like luxury items, these are things that are already starting to happen. And the fact that you're behind that NFT and with the fact that it's linked back to a domain name, you can authentically confirm that this person owns these things or is the rightful owner of this piece of land that was, sent so many times. So I think, absolutely, I think there's a massive opportunity around how does the domain name become almost a translator for the fact that, these are your crypto assets. And I think also within that, we have these horrible cases. Even right now, I think there's one of the crypto marketplaces the other day where I think they lost $1 billion in crypto. Why? Because many of these use a proprietary way of having your access to the platform. And if it gets hacked, they're able to go in and get your crypto wallet. So again, this could be one of the ways that you can protect and allow an alternative way of using and having and holding even crypto assets using a domain name, correct?
Lawyers in the room? Any lawyer?
Go ahead, you won't be quoted.
So you're the only person who I think will see that there's an opportunity for lawyers in this business. When you have people starting to get used to trading digital assets, there's always conflict potentially. So I found also a lawyer in London who only does domain business. It's going to happen even in Kenya jurisdiction, I think, where instead of leaving land to my kids, I leave them 3,000 domains as part of my will. The digital assets. Or people are fighting over Kenya-Airways and other things. What I'm saying is that those in the digital space and the legal profession, this will start to really expand. And somebody has to help the judges and the prosecutors to understand it.
Thank you very much, CEO. There's another question from Bob Uche.
Yeah, probably in reaction to Chief Evangelist here, a comment that probably I wanted to put into perspective, and probably then I come back to what Moses and Mbugua has highlighted in very interesting detail. When you talk about blockchain names, I think it's important to put some color to it and some caveat that today the internet operates off the DNS. There's a DNS that we understand. That is an ecosystem that most of us are part of. That's where the .ks of this world are. And the domain names that most of us know refer to, it's called the root. So there is a chain to it all the way to the root. But that is not the only root that exists. So there are other routes, or what we call alternative routes. Maybe that's not confusing everyone. And you could think of blockchain names today as in that category. In other words, we have blockchain names, only that they are not accessible through the normal DNS. So if you are on a .ke name, for example, you cannot access a blockchain domain name because they use a different route or alternative route. So think about that. I'll come back to monetization very quickly. And two things I wanted to comment around. And I think, Andrew, you mentioned an interesting thing. How many lawyers are in the room? I think when we talk about monetization, it is not just registrars in the room. It's not just the domain name itself. I think this applies to most of the professions around, and lawyers are critical in this, that the dispute resolution ecosystem around domain names is lacking in expertise from the lawyers community. And you could look at probably .ke or Kenya by itself, but if you are to project this beyond Kenya, then the gravity of the need becomes bigger. I'll give you a case of ICANN. So if you have a dispute with ICANN domain name processes, for example, during a name application round, like the one we are heading to. So say we apply for .bob, him and myself, and we don't agree, we can't agree between ourselves. We'll be taken through a place called IRP, or dispute resolution panel. And today, we have 7 panels. These are lawyers, as we can imagine, and we have none from Africa as an approved panel by ICANN. So monetization will not just be, or should not just be, for the registrars in the room. It is for the rest of you as well, that there are opportunities in this space that you can actually grow and be a pool that can serve both Kenya and beyond. The other component is trademarks. And I think Moses, you talked about how do you protect the different brands that a company has or your digital asset. I think there's the other element of trademark protection or brand protection that again needs our lawyers in the room to actually grow as an area of business, because that is equally lacking. So let's broaden the monetization idea and make it all inclusive. It is not just on the domain name itself. It's actually quite very broad. And if you imagine that Africa today has got less than 1% name registrations. I mean, both GTLDs and CCTLDs, less than 1% out of the 360 million domain names. So that opportunity is quite huge for both sectors, both registrars, but also the supporting environment, including for lawyers.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
So I don't have a comment.
It wasn't a question, maybe unless you have a parting shot as we come to a close.
Yeah, I think just maybe to reflect what Bob has said, I think that's very true. Like I mentioned, over the years, we're contacted by parties, including lawyers, on behalf of clients seeking to register local domains for their clients. So very much so, I think there's a massive opportunity there to sort of bring those practices and bring that dimension to what we do here locally.
It's a question.
Thank you very much. My name is Newton from Sasa House Limited. And first, thank you guys for sharing these brilliant business ideas. And we look forward to you guys
Sending our invoice.
tuongea nyuma tent. Now, I don't know whether this question is directly to you or to the CEO. When we talk about domain business, especially .ke extensions, my question is, when it comes to the ownership, like I know with .com extensions, sometime when a client register and someone wants it, we send them to these people to go and negotiate. If it goes through, you are lucky. But now with .ke, what I know is that when I come for newton.ke or .co.ke, and I find that you are the one who registered it, and yet the company is registered under me, what KeNIC does is to request for who will produce certificate of registration for the company. Now, the question is, in the event that I register, and in reality, I'm not the owner of the company, or I didn't register that company, and yet is the domain that I registered. Do I have ownership, or it will be transferred to the company that can prove the ownership? Then, secondly, once this domain name has been registered under me, and like a year later, a company with almost similar name is registered. Yes, they will have legal registration details for the domain, for the company that is, but the domain, it was me who registered a year even before the company existed. How will you treat these two scenarios? Thank you.
Thank you. Is Beth in the room? I think somebody needs to call her. She's the expert on this question. But the first part to sort of give some comfort, which is another advantage of having a .ke domain. We have less of these cases. The scenarios are accurate and precise. And we have a dispute resolution mechanism, which my colleague handles, and she can, I think, manage those two scenarios. So that's an advantage. So the less than 1% looks like a disadvantage, but because there's availability, as Kemibaro said, there's also less disputes in this desk. But the disputes can and will arise. So it's a question of the legitimacy of ownership. So the dimension you've mentioned, I think having it registered, for example, under BRS, you're talking about a CR12 or business name registration. So yeah, that's a legal requirement, and I'm just trying to buy time for Beth to make her way. It is more than that. I think her team sits to understand you might own it technically, legally, but have you built a business around it? So the legitimacy question, I think, is much more than just some, say, I was born John in my birth certificate. But somebody says, but I've been John the Baptist. I've been actually baptizing people with the name. So which one, you know, I will leave this to Beth. The issue of ownership and the legitimacy. One person owns it by registration. Somebody says, but I feel I'm the rightful owner because either I'm using it or I registered it for this actual project, but here's the document. So basically, maybe just walk with everyone on through that dispute resolution mechanism you have in place.
Good evening. Okay. My name is Beth Njao, the DPO at KeNIC. So with regards to domain disputes, we look at a couple of things. First, you can own a domain in a different sector. You could be handling events like beth.co.ke, handling events, beth.co.ke, insurance. You get? So if you bring to us, you say beth.co.ke is riding on our brand, we look at what exactly category. We also look at trademarks. Have you trademarked? Right? So, but with matters of trademark, we involve KIPI. KIPI comes in. But through that, we get to hear the two parties. So what exactly is the issue? But so long as you're not riding on beth.me.ke or beth.co.ke, trying to cyber squat what I am doing, that we automatically either suspend the domain or transfer it. But if you are in two different sectors, we do not take any action because there's no way Beth A is related to Beth B. Those are two different categories. Yeah.
Maybe just to add, I remember when I was on the board at KeNIC, the dispute resolution process was something that we worked on a lot. And I think one of the advantages we had in Kenya is that the things or the way we go about it actually gives the parties more opportunities to prove and potentially reclaim their domain, as opposed to the .com situation like I mentioned with Kenya Airways, where with all their muscle, they couldn't actually pry that domain name away from the other party. Yeah, even though they were the legitimate brand or owner, or should have been, for that domain name. So I think another thing I want to mention is that if that process is still what I recall, then you have more recourse in Kenya than you do with, say, .com, which is a top-level domain name.
As a baseline, let's assume that I registered Kenya Airways.co.ke. I mean, as we speak, maybe KeNIC could have already transferred it to Kenya Airways, maybe. But you see, in the case of .com, there is that full ownership. But in the case of .ke, if it was just the same domain, I feel like the process might be even longer. Then also to be very clear on my question, we have Newton Ltd as a company, and newton.co.ke that was registered in 2020, and Newton.ltd is registered in 2023, right? And they are coming for newtonltd.co.ke, which I registered 3 years ago, and yet the company is very young. Bearing in mind, I'm looking at the business opportunity as far as reserving a domain is concerned. The question is, will I make something out of it, or it will be transferred?
Thank you for the clarification. That's fair.
At KeNIC level, we offer mediation first. We bring the two parties on board. You've been part of a dispute resolution process before as a registrar. Okay, so the moment we receive a complaint, we bring the two parties. We hear the two sides, right? Some actually ask for money. They come and say, we'll give you the domain, but we have invested so much. We want 4 million. So as KeNIC, at that point, we cannot come in. We give these two parties opportunity to talk. If you agree, you come and tell us, we have agreed to transfer the domain and we are going to pay. If you do not agree, proceed to arbitration. We have a list of our arbitrators online on our website, kenic.wa.ke. You agree, whatever you agree, come to KeNIC. If arbitration doesn't work, go to court. But the moment you ride on Kenya Airways, that's a very well-known brand. Truth be told, you will not win that. We've had a case with airtel.co.ke. It's a known brand, trademarked in Kenya and outside. So we end up like, unfortunately, you transfer the domain. Fortunately or unfortunately, transfer it. But at any given point, we give the two parties time to talk. Yes.
I think ultimately, in the spirit of the internet, we always try to be fair and procedural where we can.
Sorry, based on your response, I was just trying to think, like, if I want to venture into maybe domain system and a business, and I say, okay, let me start registering maybe domains that can maybe in future generate something. Will it require that every domain that I register must have a backup business, which is like, for example, if I have bet.co, I have a bet limited company, so that in future maybe someone registers bet limited as a company, does not compromise my domain.
So maybe just to add on the issue of disputes, I think the biggest challenge with .ke domains is the ease of the domain being released to the other party. So what my colleague was trying to put across is that when it comes to other domain extensions such as .com, it's much harder. Unlike, I think there's a gap in the legal system when it comes to Kenya, whereby if at all maybe both parties can't agree and they now go to court, you find that most of the time the legal process might tend to lean to the person who already has an existing brand, and the person maybe who registered the domain even before this existing brand was created ends up losing. We've seen domains, especially maybe for phone brands or domains that have been registered maybe for that are popular, that is, we've seen people losing out on domains and any revenue they could have got simply because now it's progressed to a legal engagement. So maybe a challenge to KeNIC is to find a way of also protecting the people who register domains. Because if I registered a domain 10 years ago, I've been paying for it consistently, and then these new companies registered a month ago has the name and the legal documents, and when we go to court, I end up losing the domain. It's kind of not fair. Yeah, and now the other bit is that most of the time, when it gets legal, they also engage the registrar, or rather the registrar becomes like the middle man in the legal process, which also now has a implication in terms of you have to appear in court. Like, I think there's a gap in protecting the registrars, because all you did is register the domain name, but when it gets legal, you also become a respondent, which you're now required to appear to court. So I think there's a gap, and what the panelists also talked about, bringing in the lawyers for a legal framework to protect maybe the registrars and also the owners of the domain name, is something that we can work on as a community of those KE domains. Yeah.
Challenge accepted. I think the gap is clear for me, and we can look at it again with the registrar community. I just had one question. How many of your clients have actually gone all the way, the whole hog, to the courts? Do you track that number? Like a big growing number? Yeah. So sorry for being petty. In 2023, how many? It's a number, significant. Where's Bob? We know English. Okay, thank you. Thank you. I think we'll pick that up. Asante.
2023 we received disputes. Yeah. Okay. Sawa. Engineer. Oh, you asked a question on if you register your domain 10 years ago. Same as she has asked. To be a domainer. Yes.
So I have alphonse.co.ke as a domain, but I don't have any business attached to it. It is just a domain. But in let's say 5 years, someone come up and register Alphonse Limited Company. Of course, there are many Alphonse. And then maybe we get to a point where he claims that he wants that domain. Okay? And for me, myself, I say, okay, that is my domain, but I don't have necessary documents or legislative documents or statute that show that, okay, this is attached to this kind of company. It comes with a certificate of registration or a business certificate. For me, I just come like, okay, I registered. Who will be happy in this case?
I think, Alphonse, we are saying you will both be hard. And we will try and find a middle ground, whether negotiated. Because if you bought it, what was the intention? Was it speculative? How much money do you want, Alphonse? that would be the first layer. If you disagree, in Kenya, we try to find a balance. We have an escalation mechanism. You can arbitrate. If you refuse, unfortunately, you might end up in court. And we cannot guarantee you what the person on that bench, side of the bench. Yeah, but we'll give them, from our perspective, we'll give them sort of a perspective of, is it first come, first serve? Is it they have invested enough, they are known in the market, brand protection. So there are many parameters, but the process will be to find a fair outcome. in that case. So these things can be fluid, and that's why I'm saying we need everyone in the room, the lawyers, the technical people, can try and help resolve this best way forward.
Thank you, Andrew. To add on that, our ADRP policy states what an abusive domain is. So by the time you're coming to file a dispute, it must fall under that category. So we tick the boxes, A versus B. But now we involve you. So why are you saying alphonse.co.ke is violating Alphonse Limited? Yes.
Thank you, Beth. We still have one more question.
Good evening, everyone. I think from the discussion we've had on the back and forth on regulations, one of the duties that a lawyer has most times when it comes to a client, we look at the future challenges that the client might face. So it's a challenge to KeNIC that maybe you can look into the risks that are associated in case there is a duplicate of, okay, when you're registering your domain names, when you have one, no one else can have it, right? But if there is any risk that can be involved, that's something that you can advise your clients on. If Alphonse, there's Alphonse Limited and there's other Alphonse, you can advise them on the challenges that they may face in future or the risks that are involved. My question was answered during the back and forth conversation with Beth on the panel. Thank you.
Final comment, Beth?
I think over time, some of the challenges we've had is with domainers. There are some people who will register domains to extort money from well-known brands. Last year, we had 5 cases of KCB. Somebody registered KCB groups investments, came to us from CA. Another one, KCB-groups. So until it is brought to our attention, we take action. But you see, the fact that KeNIC does not register, our registrars have that visibility. So it is for them at some point to advise. I remember Fred Secunets yesterday mentioned, the moment they realize there is a domain similar to a particular product, they do a follow-up and they advise. So in this case, can you then collaborate with our registrars to help us on that? Right? Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth. Any other question? I want to take a simple poll. How many of you now feel or think that there's actually opportunities in domains? Hand up. So almost all of us. How many registrars do we have in the phone? Registrars, hands up. It's a good number. And I want to believe a lot more are watching online. So those are people to reach out to. They'll help you register your domain across the various extensions. I think it would be a disservice if we did not take note or mention the registrars who are in the room, as well as the other. We have almost 200 registrars who can be able to register your domain. I know there are people who've asked, how do I become a registrar? So I will ask our team from KeNIC. Where's this? Joel in the room. Steve. So those are account managers. They're outside. They're probably registering some people. But there's Joel. Maybe you can just wave. So Joel can walk you, take you through the journey of becoming a registrar. And there's Steve also somewhere around there. So the two of them are really key in they'll be able to assist anybody who wants to become a registrar. Last parting shot from Moses and from Mbugua.
Thank you. My parting shot will be a short story about the potential. A few years back, there was a South African company, I think it was backed by Naspers, called Mocality. And one of the things they did is they said, because you're moving to the digital age, the yellow pages is a relic of the past. And I don't know how many of you had ever listed in the yellow pages, but they used to have the fee to be in that yellow book that was placed in call boxes all over town was a bit on the steep side, even for an established business. And if you did your ROI and say, who called me from getting my details in the yellow pages, the physical book, probably not get much. So what Mocality did is they had a very interesting system of recruiting and verifying shops, retailers. And everyone, you could find them on the Mocality marketplace. And to the best of my knowledge, they had managed to register and verify over 400,000 biasharas. And this is saying Mbugua Butchery, somewhere in Langata, Moses went and marked it, someone else came and verified that it actually exists. And the reason why I quote that figure is that we're in the journey to 1 million. So if already people wanted to be listed in a marketplace for visibility, how would they then differentiate themselves? It would be if they then extended that to get a domain name. Now, when we talk about the domain name, I've said we need to go beyond the domain name and beyond the website and offer tools. One of the tools that this platform used to offer were bundled services. Let me call them messaging services. And the average amount, maybe in dollar values now, per month that they would consume is around $3. I'm painting a picture of the potential of businesses are willing to pay for services, not just for what's in the name. Yes, you've given me the domain name, but what sort of value can I extract from it? So that's a conversation for the registrars. Can you package something that SMEs or even large enterprises can see as additional value beyond the domain name in a way that is easy to create? And maybe now for KeNIC is to say, what other valuable services, like we've talked about, the trademark database should be something that I think is publicly accessible. Like you can go and say, is Coca-Cola a trademark in Kenya? So that if anyone is trying to do a Coca-Cola, like you said, flag it, follow up and say, kindly provide documentation. And what we've seen in the telco space, I'm also in value-added services in the mobile side, is if you want to go to any of the telcos and you say, I want to register a sender ID with the Coca-Cola. I mean, coming to the festive season, I want to send you guys messages with the ID Coca-Cola. The telco will say, Mbugua, please provide documentation to show that you own this. Whether that's a trademark, copyright, a business registration document, whatever that is, so that they can then originate that. Because we also have to look after the legitimate businesses and not in this race to 1 million, there could be 30% of bad actors simply trying to look for those opportunities. So maybe again, I know KeNIC also has revenue targets. Maybe it's a service that you could create that then the 200 so registrars subscribe to so they can run more efficiently and therefore reduce the cases of escalations from the site. I think that's it. Let's think beyond the domain name. Let's think of services that we could layer on there. And most importantly, the innovative business models. Remember I mentioned the callback ring, CRBT, caller ringback tone, that people are being charged 3 shillings a day for. Across the year, it comes to around that figure that we pay for regular domain name. Can you look at, I don't want to use the ni malipo mdogo, because you're literally paying for it day by day, but in a mechanic that is not painful to an SME. So that Mama Mboga, think of it this way. If you go to the Mama Mboga at the corner somewhere here, and you say today, give me 3 bob, she'll reach for the hanky and give you 3 bob. Tomorrow, do the same thing. The money is there. You just need to package it in a way that doesn't feel painful, as opposed to me going and saying, Made, give me 1,000 shillings for a domain name. We'll hear ATK. That money will stay there. But if it's 3 shillings per day, these people are liquid and they're willing to pay for services that essentially have real world value for them. Asante.
Yeah, me just reflections. I mean, believe it or not, we've been doing this stuff, I think, for almost 30 years. And I think for me, what I feel, and this is going to sound funny, but I feel like we're just getting started. Okay, that's one thing I want to say. Whatever we think we have achieved and done, now with even the advent of AI and the wonderful data centers in Kenya like PAKES, Yeah, in fact, I was with them the other day at another event with Testbook, and I was just saying, guys, until I came to your data center, I did not know this was possible in Kenya. I did not know that now I can bring back my hosting services because now we have the infrastructure that is world class. In fact, now paying the dollars to an international server center doesn't make sense because I should be doing this locally. So, if anything, we're just getting started because now we even have local infrastructure that allows us to do this locally. Number two, I don't know about you guys, yeah, but anyone who sends me, including some of the most professional and highly regarded people, an email from a Gmail for a business transaction, I don't know what it is, but I just look at that email and suddenly my perception of that person just goes down, right? Point being that I think domains have become, at least for me, a validator of somebody who's serious or business that is serious. You send me an email from a Gmail and you want to transact business, the first thing going through my mind is, are you kidding me? You mean you could not go to Safaricom, for instance, and register for one of those affordable bundles with a domain and an email address on Roundcube and send me an email and it costs you maybe 3-4K? What are you trying to tell me? I don't take you seriously. The amount of spam I get coming from Gmail is ridiculous. I block them and I report them automatically. Okay? The third thing is there's something strange happening. There was a lot of hula baloo, social media came, Twitter, Facebook, everything. But as I deal with clients, including the one I came from this afternoon to this place, the websites are becoming increasingly important as a way of determining or positioning yourself as a brand or a business organization. What's my point? There's a lot of young people today who believe by the virtue of having a Google location on Google Business Places, whatever it's called, or having a Facebook page or an Instagram account is sufficient. But that means you're dime a dozen. There's nothing distinctive. There's nothing special. The barrier to entry is very low. But the moment I see somebody has a website, and especially these days at .ke, I sort of feel a sense of comfort, a sense of trust, a sense of this must be somebody legit. And I'll give you a personal example. There's a time when my fob for my car key had a problem, and I Googled it. And I went all along this list of potential locations near Langata, which is not far from where I live. And funny enough, there was a company I think called Car Key, not far from here, by the way, just down the road. And the reason why I went to them is because they actually had a website under .ke. And because of that, I got a good service. I even raved about it on LinkedIn and Facebook and Twitter. And the only differentiator was the fact that if this person had taken the time to build a website, and not to mention it was also .ke, then for me, I had that level of confidence that this is the most legit business. So I think as we think about the value of a domain name as a brand differentiator, as a way of positioning yourself above the noise, I think more than ever, because now the barriers to entry are zero for social media and other platforms, it becomes even more important to have a web presence that works off a legitimate domain name, and preferably a .ke. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Moses Kemibaro and Mbugua Njihia. Asanteni sana. Thank you very much.